Well, good morning. This is Unmer Sheth from quiet San Francisco and beautiful morning here. Good morning and good evening to everyone, wherever you are. Again, those of you who don't know, my name is Unmer Sheth. With me today, we have two very well-known experts in impact measurement and management. Um, and I really welcome you to this new webinar series that we have, and I'll talk about that in a minute altogether. We still have quite a few people joining this session, so I'm going to go a little bit slow here. Um, um, just to give first introduction of two speakers. Most of you might already know them, but just to rekindle some of those people who have not met Jane and Veronica. Jane Reisman, I know her for over 5 years, but she connects the dot between the impact measurement and management in impact investing and evaluation profession. As a founder of the US-based evaluation firm called ORS Impact, Jane developed a record of engaging in the new frontier of social impact and the field building to optimize and scale impact. Her current work as a social impact advisor is focusing on strengthening impact measurement and management. By engaging with the field leaders and organizations such as Rockefeller Foundations, the Jane, MacArthur Foundation, Mission Investor Exchange, AEA, American Evaluation Association, Impact Management Project, and World Economic Forum. Jane, is anything else left over now? You have done, you work with almost all the well-known organizations in the space. That's fantastic. Veronica Olazabal is a senior advisor and director at the Rockefeller Foundation. So we are very thankful for having you here today. Veronica is an award-winning impact expert with working in 15 plus years of working in a leadership role, working with the global agencies such as MasterCard Foundation. Veronica serves on a number of boards, including Toniic, Funds for Shared Insights, and she has also published on this topic in American Journal of Evaluation and Stanford Social Innovation Review, SSIR. So welcome, Jane and Veronica, if you want to just say hi before I quickly introduce the subject today.
Welcome, everyone.
All right, thank you. Okay, so today's series really is part of our series of impact measurement and management. Just to a quick recap for everybody, what SUPAC is. SUPAC is a San Francisco-based social enterprise committed to advancing the learning from the stakeholders' voice into continuous learning and improvement. Essentially, it's all about making impact measurement and management right. This is actually, for those of you who've been attending regularly, this is all about outcome and social impact series. It's a webinar series that's designed to generate the dialogue between the leaders and the change makers from the respective fields. Together, we intend to learn about the challenges, solutions, and the risks of sustainable development goals theme area. We are so glad and thankful. This is just a 1-year-old series now, and very thankful to have amazing speakers really advancing this voice on continuous learning and improvement altogether. Very thankful to have folks who are talking about collective impact, to giving an in-depth understanding of how enterprise can scale the social impact. The first series by Sachi, David Bond-Bright had an amazing perspective on stakeholder voice, and especially some of the key, very interesting point on how to listen more effectively to the stakeholders altogether. So very thankful to have them. And without that, we wouldn't be where we are. I'm so grateful that today we have 933 registration. And without this speakers who are really supporting this work, we wouldn't be where we are. So thankful to all of you. just to get started on the topic here, I just want to call out the fact that there's an elephant in this room, which is really that nobody wants to talk about. And I think I'll speak a little bit more about that in next slide. So as you know, many of us have observed a lot of change after the pandemic. There was initially everything was frozen, but what we see here is a very new and unique thinking from the businesses, impact investors, and the philanthropy, and that has forced everybody to rethink what is their social impact and sustainability is. It's true that many of us are struggling to understand what social impact is, and that's why we are here, because it's not easier. It's not like a financial measurement altogether. So we must really innovate upon the traditional monitoring and evaluation-based approach and move learning to the different level altogether. And the new catchword that you might keep hearing is going to be about continuous learning and improvement. Or sometimes people use impact measurement management. Fundamentally, if you see the 5 key characteristics of that is going to be about standardization, which Jane and Veronica will speak volume on that, because they will going to talk about different standards and frameworks in the space. Comparability is very important, because it's not just enough that you have a right kind of framework. You have to have a ways to have very clear way of measuring and communicating and demonstrating the impact in a consistent fashion between the multiple investments or projects. Better and faster stakeholder voice. Impact is all about stakeholder. If you don't involve stakeholders in the picture, you are not really understanding social impact. Social data intelligence will become a big, important innovation in next coming years. And you will hear quite a bit from this series, and verification of the data. So we like to welcome Jane Reisman and Veronica Olazabal to this series and present this thing. Just to give you a format of this webinar, please ask the question in Q&A section, not in the chat. If you want to introduce yourself, you can do that. We have over 300 participants today. And so we had to really systematize the whole Q&A. We would love to address as many questions as possible. Please upvote them in a Q&A section. Do not ask the question in chat. You are welcome to chat in the chat window, but not ask the question. We will keep 10 to 15 minutes. We may go about 1 hour if you want to stick around and ask any question to Jane and Veronica. But fundamentally, we'll try to answer as much as possible online, and we'll keep some time at the end. And I request Jane and Veronica to address most of the questions. So we may already anticipate some of the questions, so we'll try to address some of those things in the presentation. So that's why it's going to be very solid 45 minutes of conversational presentation here altogether. By the way, Jane and Veronica has just coming out with a new wonderful book I would like to highlight. They both are available from Wiley and Amazon. So please go out there. It's available as a pre-order and should be available in the December timeframe. So this should be a pretty exciting book, very insightful, I'm pretty sure. And so I'm really looking forward to this publish of the book, and I hope you can check out this thing. We will be sharing recording and some of the resources after this presentation. So you don't have to make notes yet. We'll be sharing a lot of the details by email. So thank you so much. And maybe I'll ask Jane to kick off the call. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm going to pass the baton to Veronica. So thank you, Unmesh, for the wonderful introduction.
Great, thank you. And I am in the process of trying to share my screen. So please give me a moment, since Unmesh, you just stopped screening. You're sharing your screen. Great.
I did. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Let me just get it set up here. And don't do a preview of my slides. Great. Can everyone see that? And Jane and Mesh, you're the only everyone who can hear.
It's all good.
Perfect. And can you hear me? Great. Thank you. So welcome, everyone. We're so excited to be here. I know I speak for Jane and myself, and happy to share what we have learned over the last few years around impact measurement norms for powerful results. Before I get started, wanted to acknowledge so many people from around the world, and it makes us really excited to see you via the chat and to connect with you during this unprecedented time, as Unmesh mentioned. I know that Unmesh talked a little bit about who we are, but we wanted to emphasize a couple of things because it's critical to understanding the lens by which we are speaking the content through. So Jane and I are both evaluation executives, basically. We spend a lot of time thinking about impact. We wake up in the morning, we have lots of conversations, and we do our research and practice our evaluation every day, deeply connected to this world of social, cultural, all kinds of evaluation, and the 40 years of deep expertise that has emerged from the tools and approaches perspective. And then our area of focus is impact measurement and management in the impact investing space. So serving as a bridge to those areas is truly where this work is coming from. We are also experts, hopefully I can say experts after 12 years of it, in the philanthropic sector. So really thinking about how innovative financial tools, different tools, not just government finance, but development finance, philanthropic finance, impact investing, and social finance can be used for good. And we are very enthusiastic about thinking about strategic learning, not just about the methods and the tools, not just about generating good quality data and results, but really the loop around in terms of how are we actually using this information to move in the direction of the impacts and outcomes that we'd like to see. So a little bit of a session roadmap as to what we're going to do today. We said 45 minutes, probably more like 35 to 40 minutes, so that we can allow time for responding to some of the questions that come up through the Q&A, not the chat function, as Unmesh mentioned. So this work really, for us, this journey started in 2007 when the Rockefeller Foundation coined the term impact investing. And Jane's going to speak a little bit about what came before that, but we want to spend some time talking about why we're even here, and knowing that this journey started in 2007 with the coining of impact investing is relevant. We're then going to transition to where we came from, where we're looking back at many conversations around social finance and how that might have positioned how we then went forward as an industry for measuring impact in the impact investing space. We're going to talk a little bit about what good looks like today, hence the norms part of the title. And then we're going to look towards the future in terms of where we're going, particularly thinking about this moment in time, this moment of social reckoning in the US, this moment that we are all experiencing around the pandemic, and really what implications these big moments have on the way that we're thinking about measuring the impacts on people and planets. So with that said, I'm going to stop talking and kick us off with Jane. Over to you.
Okay. Thanks, Veronica, and thanks, Unmesh. I recently heard the term rainbow washing, and that one was new to me. I'd heard of impact washing and I'd heard of greenwashing, but rainbow washing are all those colorful SDG tags that people like to put onto their reports and on their marketing material as a way of saying, I stand for social development. And in reality, that's a beautiful thing. But what we're really here and concerned about is, how do we know that you actually are making the difference you intend to make, and that you're doing more than putting a beautiful logo onto your materials, and that you actually have ways of establishing with some confidence that change is actually happening? So this area that we're talking about today, measurement in impact investing, follows on a tradition, which we'll talk about a little bit more, of responsible and sustainable investing. And it's a term that's more recent, as Veronica has said, that continues to grow. And as it continues to grow in all kinds of financial vehicles, we have a question about what are the norms, what are the ways that we actually can believe that change is happening, and how do we use that to manage for more impact? And so we chose the term norms in our title of our presentation very deliberately because norms are shared practices. They're conventions. They're what we agree are best practices, and we do it voluntarily. And right now, the stage of where this field is all voluntary. It's all voluntary activity. But when you have a lot of voluntary activity, you might have lots of variation and lots of different approaches, and it's really confusing and chaotic out there for those who are trying to do good. So we are hoping that we can share with you today some of the norms that are building on consensus, that are actually aligning with each other to allow for more comparability. And that's why we are here today, is share what we have become very aware of, and not just us, others as well, as the newer norms that are developing. It's unlikely that in the near future, we're going to have a lot of regulation or standardization and industry regulation around these norms. It's still a period of development. So I want to give you one little quote that I love from Kristen Hull from the NIA Impact Capital. Those of us in impact investing, just buckle up your seatbelts and get that much more committed, because we're not going to count on the government to step in and do this. So what we really are suggesting is that there are a lot of on-ramps to these norms. It takes a commitment to want to exhibit best practices in trying to do this kind of measurement. So moving on to the next slide, we just want to make it clear that what we're talking about today here is this third column, thematic investing or impact investing, which follows on the heels of responsible investing, which we all became very aware of, mostly growing in the 90s, of trying to avoid negative impacts, trying to make sure you weren't doing harm to people and planet, and companies trying to demonstrate that, and investors trying to screen for that. And then we moved to sustainable investing. Why just avoid negative harm? Why don't we make sure that we are trying to show we're doing something positive? And it was the growth of ESGs, environment, social, and governance, and best practices. And this third evolution we're talking about is very specific to thematic investing, which is picking a specific area, and it could be more than one area, of clean energy, gender equity, financial inclusion, ending poverty, resilient cities, but saying we're going to have a specific impact on this theme. And that starts to get more measurable and intentional about what change you're trying to make. So let's move on to the next slide. Veronica, you want to tell us a little bit about where we came from, how we got to this place?
Sure. So Jane and I engaged in 2015, and I'm a storyteller. So Jane and I engaged in 2015 after I had taken a little bit of a hiatus from the Rockefeller Foundation. And I was around in 2007 when we coined the term impact investing. So when I came back to the foundation, I was asked the question, what does the evidence base look like? So I engaged Jane to answer this question for me, which was, where is the impact in impact investing? And the results of that study are presented here, which came out in October 2016, available on the Rockefeller Foundation website. And so we did a bit of a landscaping to answer that question. We thought surely the impact investing space, with a history of focusing on numbers and on metrics and on data, having emerged from this long arc of social finance and responsibility focused on doing good in the world, surely there must be an evidence base out there. And what we learned pretty quickly was that sadly, that we, in 2007, when we started this journey, we were thinking about equipping the ecosystem with the right types of enterprises and companies, and enabling environment actors such as the Global Impact Investors Network, the B Lab. We were doing all the right things, and sadly, we kind of got stuck there, right, from an evidence perspective. And so 5 years later, we were still only talking about outputs, and we were still talking about numbers. And there was very much a lack of an evidence base. But what there was many attempts, many tools, many frameworks, many approaches that was creating a lot of fragmentation in the space. And so if you were an investor or an asset holder or a fund manager or a company in 2016, you probably, and you came to the space, you probably would be very confused. You probably were concerned that there wasn't a standard. You were surprised. And so you would do what any good company and enterprise would do. You would build it yourself. So there was a lot of bespoke approaches that contributed to the fragmentation. And then finally, where Unmesh started, at the highest level, there was really no way of being able to compare. There were different data sets, different data types, different systems. They were at the company level, they were at the fund manager level, they were LPs and GP levels. And there was a lot of conflation between, for example, what is ESG, what is impact measurement, is it the same thing? So there was no opportunity for comparability. Our key takeaway from that study was that we were heading down the path of impact washing. And even though we were speaking the language of transparency and speaking the language of standardization, we were not acting and behaving in that direction. And so before going to the next slide, Jane, do you want to talk a little bit about this image on the cover? Oh, and you're on mute, Jane.
I'd love to talk about this image, and I have that image on my desk as well, because this image is actually named Parataxis by an artist who drew this image. And when we were working on this report, it struck me that we had two different worlds. We had the world of measurement and evaluation, and we had the world of impact measurement and management. And even though they seem like they should be connecting, they really were operating side by side. And that's what parataxis is that things that should be alike but have no connection. And so that's one reason why Veronica and I set out to say, what have we learned from M&E that can make its way into this world of impact measurement and management? And what are we learning from impact measurement and management that should be making its world into traditional M&E? So that's what this image represents to us, is side by side, but there should be some connectivity.
Thank you, Jane. And so now we're going to fast forward a little bit to what happened after the study and what we learned.
Okay.
Back to you, Jane.
All right. So if your eyes are kind of like going blurry now with all of this with all these words and charts, what we really tried to do more recently, it's 5 years later, and as Veronica said, this worry about impact washing, we tried to track what is actually happening and to what extent is there actually field building consensus going on. How much is the field evolving to agree upon norms about how to actually measure? And what you see on the horizontal axis, that there is still quite a number of proprietary methods, which are, there's nothing wrong, actually, that's fabulous to have proprietary methods, bespoke, market-based methods that really provide some innovation in the field. And as these innovations happen, they start to move over to a consensus about the field-based methods. And the consensus that we're really interested in today, because of the focus on impact investing, is the top right quadrant. We're interested in where is the consensus happening right now around how to measure impact investing. The bottom half of this is really about the prior form of ESG, how to measure environment, social, and governance. That's a fairly mature field. The part that's really the frontier is this top right quadrant, where we need more consensus, more norms, and things that get developed in the proprietary area make their way through innovation over to here. But then we need agreement, and we need to have a spread of good practices. Now, why this is really important to us is this is a nice visual chart that I ran across this past month, and it looks a lot like the charts you would see from the GIN studies that happen every year about how much of a blocker is it to the impact investing field that we don't have consensus about measurement and that people are all measuring very differently. And as you can see by this chart, two of the quadrants, the navy blue and the peacock green, I'm going to call them those colors, I hope they show up that way for you, add up to 39% of these two quadrants, practically 40% of the answers about what does it take to grow impact investing is that we need more comparable reporting and we need to have more proof of impact. So in order for money to flow into doing positive good, intentional positive good, there's a huge outcry for we need to have better proof that we are having impact. And it's not just necessarily, as Anmesh said, proof one time, but there's continuous learning kind of proof that after you do something, you test it and find out if it's making a difference. So that's one reason why we're so interested in the norms, that people are sharing these norms in order to be able to establish this is really credible. It is not just putting a SDT tag or an impact washing or greenwashing statement out. It is proof and it's comparable kinds of reporting. Next slide, please, Veronica. So,
Great. So over back to me.
Yes.
So what does good look like today? And that's why we're all here. One of the questions that I usually get after Unmesh or others present myself, my background, and the person is like, oh, you know something about measuring things. And you know something about measuring things in the impact investing space. So I usually get the, where do I start? I just don't know where to start. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about how we would answer this question today in 2020, because now we have a sense of what good looks like. We're yet not at the space of having, being in a world where we can compare apples to apples, but we're definitely out of the world where we're all talking about apples and bananas, or fill in the blank with a more culturally relevant fruit from your particular geographic area. So to start, I'm going to start with a study that is done by the Global Impact Investors Network every year, and it's called their Annual Impact Investor Survey. And it's been really interesting to watch the responses change over the years. It's been really interesting to see who actually takes this survey. But the most recent results show that there are a few key features. There are a few go-to tools and approaches that many are already taking. And this is probably, like, as Mensch, who also has been following the evolution of this work, can attest to, as well as many of you who are, have been around for at least 5 years. And number one, the need for consensus around this big umbrella and this sense of, you know, how do I even speak from a language perspective with others that are in this work, particularly in the as we move towards more of a blended finance conversation, right? Because people and planet isn't everybody's conversation. So it's interesting that the Sustainable Development Goals as a framework has emerged as almost the majority, I would say universal, but 73% isn't 100. So 73% of many of the people that respond at all levels, institutional and individual investors, respond that they're using the Sustainable Development Goals, and we'll talk a little bit about a case study around that. About half are using the GINS IRIS Plus, and we'll talk a little bit about the evolution of the GINS IRIS approach. In 2008-ish, when they emerged, they were considered a catalog of metrics, and the assumption is that you could go to it and pick your metric, and somehow it would plug you into a standardized conversation, and you'll be able to say something about your results. And fast forward, the GIN has learned that actually it's not that easy and simple. It's really about an end-to-end system. So it's great to see the progress and the uptake on the GIN IRIS Plus approach. And then something that we talk about, in fact, it's in the title, and we talk of the session, and also of the slide. The Impact Management Project appeared over the last couple of years and really drove a lot of consensus building across the various different actors, both in the more conventional development finance space, but then also in the impact investing space. And so it's great to see that a third are using the IMP's approach and frameworks. And then finally, about 1 out of every 5 of the respondents is using something called the IFC-led, not the IFC principles, the IFC-led operating principles for impact management. And this is significant. While it's smaller than all the other frameworks that are being used. It's significant because the IFC is a very large actor in the ecosystem. And their ability to want to create a framework that would guide both their public and private types of financing is exceptional and is signaling the mainstreaming that we want to see as we think about how do we scale impact investing. And in addition to that, they add a more sophisticated element to the work that is primarily of everything else, which is mostly self-reported information. They add this, this sense of, well, we have to hold up the mirror and verify it. And so we'll see where that goes, and we'll talk about that a little bit further out. And I wish I could see your questions, but I'm sharing your screens and I can't. So hopefully we'll have time to get to that. So this leads to the must-haves. So back to the question around, all right, well, where do I start? I can start at so many places, and I would say that the journey, your impact management and measurement journey, really will be very specific to your particular company or your particular portfolio. But if you start in a specific area, you will already be 50 to 60% of the way there in terms of being able to compare comparability, compare your work to others in some way, shape, or form, and you'll have enough of a nuanced perspective to be able to ask the right questions and use the right tools. So number one of the must-haves is thinking about impact management. So for some time when we first launched this concept of impact investing, we focused on the concept of intentionality. How can we direct finance towards things that will hopefully produce good products and services in the world? And we presumed that that would happen as we were managing the financial aspects of the company or of the portfolio. And what we've learned is that impact is not going to just appear because you intend for it to, right? You need to actually manage it, and you should manage it at the same as early on as managing your financial management. So thinking about not just driving financial and social performance, but actually thinking about managing financial and managing impact performance as a philosophy and as an approach is really critical. And the Impact Management Project did a really good job of setting up some of the tools and frameworks to help do that, such as unpacking the 5 dimensions of impact, which we'll talk a little bit about. Number 2, I've already talked about the IRIS Plus system, and we'll do a little bit of a deep dive into that. But the GIN has a lot of really good resources around how to move beyond just an inventory of metrics and how to think about outputs and outcomes in a more evidence-based way. And they've been doing a lot of really good research and study around that. And then number 3, as we talked about, is aligning to the Sustainable Development Goals. Those of you in the global development space can honestly say that it's not necessarily like the best, but it is a global framework. And I would say that that is part of the challenge. And that is only going to be exacerbated as we as impact, those in the impact industry on the private side, move into more of a global development landscape of actors. And so the SDG framework, number 1, provides measures and metrics and targets that are really helpful to start with. But number 2, provides a common language on the things that are important and critical for impact investors that also resonates with the global finance space. So we become more of a community. And so I am going to talk a little bit about this 5 dimensions piece before handing it back over to Jane. And so if you've been in the impact space for some time, you typically are accustomed to the conversation around, how are you measuring your impact? What is your impact? What kind of impact? And we use the word impact so much, it starts to actually become meaningless. And in itself, you begin to understand it as a very unidimensional, homogeneous concept. And what that creates is this inability to actually effectively measure it and effectively see it, right? Because you're looking for the one metric, you're looking for the one outcome, you're looking for this one change. And so what the Impact Management Project did from their thousands of interviews was they surfaced this idea that impact actually is multidimensional, and it has 5 dimensions. And if you can start with asking yourself something about these 5 dimensions earlier on, or as a reflective adaptive management discussion, we're going to get a little bit closer to being able to identify the what that should be measured, because you will be able to identify what are the types of changes, what are the types of behaviors, who, how much would success be, and whether or not your funds are actually the only funds in the ecosystem contributing to this, and managing risk. And during the case study component of this session, we're going to talk a little bit about what that actually means, because I know it feels very theoretical at this moment. The most important key takeaway here is that impact is not unidimensional, it is multidimensional. Back over to you, Jane.
Okay, and I just want to say, trying to keep up with the Q&A, and great questions coming in, answering them fairly quickly. People are asking for the link to the report that Veronica showed. So I think that we'll provide all links afterwards, but unless somebody wants to do it while we're talking. Okay, so.
And so, Jane, since you have been answering this thing diligently, and I think you are doing a pretty good job there, so people can review the answer right there or online. You can go a little bit more. You have 5 more minutes to continue with your thoughts.
Oh, wow. Gee,
No,
that's a present.
by the way, there's a good question from David Bond, right? You might want to answer that.
We'll try to give some people a chance for their voice too. So thank you. All right. So a lot of the questions coming in was like, I'm new at this, we're a startup, where do we start? And I think that's where Veronica's really been emphasizing. These are the on-ramps for starting that Veronica just went through, that we're really recommending, associating your work with the IMP, the IRIS+, the SDGs, the IFC-led principles. So I just wanted to just say that, because that's a lot of the nature of the questions. Let me say a little bit more. Veronica gave you some depth on the IMP, the Impact Management Project, 5 dimensions. People call them for shorthand the 5 Ds. Really critical. Those 5 questions are critical. And what's really interesting here is we're looking at a timeline. In just a 10-year period, IRIS revised the catalog of metrics 5 times. That's a lot of continuous learning as this field is evolving quickly. But this last time, the IRIS Plus is different, because it is no longer just a catalog of metrics. They are calling it an end-to-end system. And that means they are trying to help you navigate the entire process from beginning to end. And they are not doing it as IRIS, and this is our brand. They're doing it as a public good that is about how do you integrate in the IFC-led principles, the SDGs, the Impact Management Project, stakeholder voice, theory of change, all of the things you've been asking about in the box. They have ways to enter and exit the system that they've offered about this. And so maybe we can go to the next slide for a moment, Veronica. This next slide features what is different about an end-to-end system. And first of all, when I first entered this field and people said, the place you turn to is IRIS, and I think it was IRIS 3.0 at the time, or 2.0, there were like 500 plus indicators. And it's like our colleague called them naked indicators. They didn't have a context. Like, which one are you going to pick? 1, 300, 229, like there's just were too many. But actually we need all those indicators. But we also need to know which are the core set of indicators. If you're going to measure 5 or 10 indicators, which ones would you choose if I'm in affordable housing, or if I'm in clean energy, or if I'm in financial inclusion? And so that's different. They have now used evidence. They commission experts in different theme areas to say, what do we have substantial amount of research to tell us that these are the kinds of indicators that we can trust are solid and credible? They're not the only indicators. Then you can add your others that you care about. You can add indicators that your stakeholders say, you must pay attention to this. So you're not restricted to the core set, but at least we have guidance now on what is a core set. And importantly, each of those indicators match the 5 dimensions that Veronica just shared. They match the what, and they match the who, and they match the how much. That's really profound. And one of my favorite things about those core metrics set is that every one of these core metrics have at least one outcome. And for many of us, that's a huge step forward to get beyond counting how many to actually saying, what difference does it make in people's lives? Not just how many were touched, but what impact do you have on a change statement, a behavior change, a practice change, a knowledge change, a lifestyle change, a poverty change. So it's also very practical. Trust me, I've done some writing where I would want to write 30 pages. They say, put it into 2 pages. It's very readable. Every resource they have are really broken down and make sure it's very readable. And then they give you references to the 30 and 50, 100 page papers as well. And they have carefully aligned with all of these partners in a structured network so that you're not saying, do I listen to them or listen to them? There's huge amount of alignment. So I think that they boast that they're the most widely used set of metrics for impact measurement. They're not perfect. Nothing is perfect, but they actually are, for all of you asking, where do I start? At least aligning with the IRIS Plus system would be a very important place to start because they have aligned with the other systems. Okay, so I'm sure there's questions about IRIS Plus in the Q&A. I'll leave it to Veronica to take a look at those. Now
Sorry,
I'm going to
Jane,
go to my.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
And just to underscore. And so I see that there's some back and forth because I figured out the Q&A somehow with sharing. So there is some back and forth, and I think something else that we should underscore is that when one is asked the question around how are you measuring your impact, right? Particularly an investor, I'm going to put my investor hat on right now. There is a little bit of an assumption that hopefully whoever's answering the question, has a particular perspective, but there's a lot that gets presumed in that moment, right? And what one wants to prevent is going down a methodological path, because part of what we're talking about is measuring impact is not just about what is the academic model that you're going to use in order to do that. Like measuring impact, it's about being aligned around the intention. And so the language matters. So from a sustainable development goal perspective that Jane is going to talk about in a second, there's I think the uptake of that tool is not about, it has themes, it has these 17 areas, it has a lot of different numbers attached to it, but it's not about that. It's actually about the common language framework and allowing that to be a good place to start. And then the other piece, just to emphasize on the IRIS Plus and the 2x2 that Jane showed earlier, what we're talking about is you don't have to start from building it yourself. There's enough consensus about the work, and there's enough, while most of this is still voluntary, the pieces, the leading agencies working on these issues are coordinating to help enable the sense making across the industry. So the Impact Management Project is working with the GIN's IRIS Plus team. Different groups of people, including accountants and auditors and evaluators, are out there. And that's what we mean when we talk about the big tents. And so that's significant to know, because there is a best practice that has emerged. And while there's not an easy answer about what your particular measurement question is, there are places that you can go to start. And I have to thank people that have actually focused on the fact that sometimes measurement isn't about measurement at all, which is our colleagues Sarah Olson and Kate Ruff. They have a really good SSIR paper around that, if that is something that you'd be interested in. Sorry, Jane, back to you.
No, I'm glad. And let's just keep this conversational, because one of the questions someone asked is, where does theory of change fit into all of this? Is that also part of this? And I want to say that I didn't say this a moment ago about the IRIS Plus, but they really recommend that you have a theory of change or an impact thesis as part of what's guiding you in this work. So we often think about the tool and the method, and we need those practical and tactical things, but this is really about how you envision change and how you continuously learn, and that using comparable ways of getting there is what our message is today. Speaking about comparable ways, these 17 goals exceeded everybody's expectations in terms of the agreement of not just governments, but private sector and social sector and every level of government to want to identify with, these are the goals that I am working on, or these are the goals that we are trying to support through our initiatives. And many of you might be aware of, before these SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, came out, the United Nations had MDGs, Millennial Development Goals. There were, I think, 15 at the time, and they're for 15 years. The problem was the UN made them up. They didn't make them up. They developed them as a UN system with countries. It didn't give room for private enterprises and social sector to get involved in them. So the fact that the UN learned, and in developing these, they had lots of convenings that included all the sectors who are working on impact. And I think that's one reason why they're very relatable. Now, beyond these 17 things, it's very hard to deny number 2, no hunger. It's very hard for anyone to say, oh, that's a terrible goal. No hunger is just such a big, broad statement. Behind these 17 goals are targets and indicators. 170 something targets. I think it's 169 targets, over 200 indicators. They're written more from a country point of view than they are a private investment point of view, or philanthropy or social sector. One of the examples I share will show how you can then use them for yourself, as well as there's something happening right now, the impact standards developed by UNDP, which will actually have certification to allow you to say that you are actually working on SDG number 1, and these are the ways you're measuring it, and you could be certified as actually doing something toward that. So that's a really big, profound new change happening here. Okay, so let's move on now. I'm going to continue sharing, going into a storytelling, and what I wanted to share with you is that Veronica and I wanted to get past the theory and past the frameworks and actually show use cases of who has used any of these methods and how have they used them. And so we picked 3 really different ones to share with you today. We'll go really quickly. We discussed them more in our chapter. I wish we wrote the whole book on mission, but we actually wrote a chapter in this book in measurement. And we share a lot of our writings and publications and presentations. But this is a group, Upaya, which I think Sachi's online today, and she was one of the presenters earlier on. Just amazing what Upaya, without a lot of resources, relatively speaking, we're talking about a few $1 million of funding as a fund, said, we are really out to solve problems about the poorest of the poor in India and try to increase the quality of jobs and to increase what happens when you have a high quality job. And that it wasn't just about growing companies for the company's sake, but it was really to change qualitatively people's lives. So Upaya devotes, and Sachi can correct me, I think 10% of their funds to serious measurement. And by serious measurement means following up with the people's lives who are affected over time, so that they can adjust what they're doing. It's not to measure to brag. It's not to measure to get more money. It's to measure to find out, are we having the effect we want to be having? And as Sachi has written in blogs and elsewhere and has said, if we're not having deep impact, then we're not doing our job. So we're connecting this here to the Impact Management Project at this moment. They're very clear on who, the poorest of the poor. They're very clear on what. They're trying to increase job growth, and they're trying to increase the quality of life that comes out of that job growth. And then Sachi has been known to write and say out loud that it's the depth of impact, how much change that really matters. So it's not just counting how many people have jobs. That's a great place to start, but it's also, and how much more revenue an enterprise makes, but can you actually change the quality of your housing? have more food on the table, have more education for your kids, etc. So this chart shows you some of the things that people are hoping to achieve. I want to say that a mesh statement about continuous learning is what it's all about. So in one moment, Upaya noticed one of their enterprises was not having the results they hoped about people saving their money and using that money for longer term gains. They investigated it. They did more collection of information and talked to the people and found out that they were having trouble getting bank accounts to save money, and to leave your money unbanked could be vulnerable to theft. So they worked with that enterprise to set up payroll deduction, very easy for the job holders to be able to save money through that enterprise. And that to me is a beautiful example of once you learn something, to actually see what can you do to manage for impact as you go along. And we're really not talking about a very complicated piece of work, but it really demonstrates what it really means to care about impact and to measure it through our conventions. Okay, let's move on to our next example. Wish I could spend a lot more time, but you can read about them, or you could you can read about each of these groups. So let's go to the other end of the spectrum, Nuveen, in terms of how much money we're talking about. Over $1 trillion in this large international asset fund. Originally started out as a pension fund for public workers, teachers, and other public service workers who care about impact. And so the Nuveen assets are invested in many ways, but there's a lot of the funds which are invested in responsible and sustainable investing, and more recently in very specific impact investing. And this one is an example of their affordable housing, specifically becoming investing in companies that provide affordable housing, initially through urban infill in dense urban areas. And then over time saying, we're not reaching all the people who need this. We really need to be expanding to more rural populations and expanding geographically. Now, a few things that Nuveen did is they started with an impact thesis, an impact theory of change, of what does it take to actually create change in affordable housing. And when they did that, this is an example of now using IRIS+. IRIS+ suggests that you have an impact thesis or a theory of change. And when they made their theory of change, one of the things that they thought would be so is that there would be more educational achievement if you had stable housing. But the evidence base in the IRIS+ shows very mixed results for educational outcomes with stable housing. An interesting, commonly held assumption, but not as well held up by the evidence. So they didn't include that in their theory of change and their measures because it doesn't have the evidence base behind it. But they did include things that you can't just provide housing, you have to have supportive services and you have to have transportation. So one of the things that they found is that when they started to expand geographically to rural areas, there was not as much access to transportation. And this table shows, it's a data chart they provided, that as they expanded geographically, which is the orange line, into more states in the US, in this case, it's a US investment, the number of people receiving the transportation, access to transportation went down. So that means there's a trade-off here. This is the impact management at work. Do they go back to let's only do this in urban places, or do they actually actively manage for impact? And in this case, in talking with Nuveen, and this is a use case published on the IRIS website, in this case, they are working with the affordable housing companies about how they could provide transportation, or partnering with other agencies about how they could provide transportation. So not just accepting this as it is, or going back to just urban, they're working to actively try to make their theory of change happen by working closely with the enterprises that they invest in. Okay, so let's go now to our third example. Realizing we're close to the end of time, we want to be able to conclude too. I'll go through this one, Toniic, which is a network of investors. And this network of investors are deep impact investors. So different, networks have different, areas that they converge around. This is a group of high net worth individuals, family foundations that care deeply about having impact. And so while they may be part of larger networks, they also they're very much wanting to know what is on the front edge of this. And Toniic chose to measure as a very important part of what they do, create measurement frameworks that all of their members could work through. And they started with the SDGs because the SDGs is a common language that everybody can relate to. And in doing so, people in their network identified which SDG are they most prioritizing? What do they care most about? And then they looked at how they were investing their money. And as you could see, they invested their money through cash, fixed income, public equity, private, etc. It's not just any one way. But even though they were spread across a number of SDGs, they found that people were not matching what they cared about with where their money was. Now, having that feedback of just using those 17 categories allowed them to see the disparity. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One is you can make more money in some areas than other areas, or there's other reasons for it as well. But the SDG allowed them to say, are we aligning our investments with what we care most deeply about? And they've also gone much deeper. They have a tracer now for both enterprises and for the investors to actually not just to look at the SDGs, but outcomes and align, and impacts and outputs align with the IRIS and align with the impact management project. So we're just showing you examples of where you can set up systems that incorporate these best practices. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Veronica now to talk about where are we going.
Great, and I have been doing like the marathon version of responding to your questions. So sorry that it is short, but our session slides will be available, I believe, that Unmesh can make those available. And if you have questions directly to us, I've just chatted our Gmail accounts if that is something that you would be interested in following up on. So where are we heading? So there's been a lot of work, and I love the questions because it's not about necessarily like, what's the indicator I should use for fill in the blank? It's really about like, what's the approach? What's the entry point? Who are the partners? Much better questions. And then there's all that all those data quality questions, which we love because at the end of the day, if your data is bad, none of this matters, right? And so great signal of the evolution of where we are. So where are we heading? So David Bonwright, I know you're on the call and I don't know if we still are, but feedback and listening is something that the impact investing industry is starting to look at, and it is on the new horizon. There are some tools that are out there. For example, 60 decibels and Viamo that gets to like mobile data collection. But more importantly, it's the philosophy and the principle about who we are doing our work to. It's about getting validated and verified information from the end user. And the private sector has this long history of thinking about the customer base and what they need and how to pivot their products and services based on customer feedback. The social sector has not been great at that, surprisingly. And so when you get this impact investing sector that's a little bit in between, it's nice to be thinking about customer facing information through listening and feedback at all points in the life cycle, throughout all of impact measurement and management. And now it's cost effective enough for us to be able to do pretty quickly. So that is on the horizon. Number two, we mentioned the operating principles for impact management, and there are a couple of questions out there about, so what does this all matter if all the numbers are simply and easy to get now? Like it doesn't give you anything about context. And so that's true. And that's why principle number 9 of the operating principles for impact management is really critical, because it's about holding up the mirror and actually validating, evaluating, and putting context to all of these numbers. And that is where Jane and I are from. That's the sector that we come from. And really that for us is the next step and critical for impact investing. Number 3, new norms. We're in a pandemic. We can't go places. Virtual and remote living is how we're engaging. So we're seeing a proliferation of all kinds of new tech being applied to impact measurement and management, and not just mobile data, but geospatial, remote sensing, and big data. And we have a couple of articles and reports around that. And so taking a look at that. And that's it. We're going to close because we're at time. Over to you, Jane. And you're on mute.
Okay, well, we're at time and we're going to close. And I bet you're wondering, what does this picture say? And what is it? Am I looking at a coronavirus? Am I looking at someone's brain? What am I looking at? Actually, this is a picture of complexity. And it is actually one that was shared with me recently of a human cell. And look at all the action happening there. And the reason we want to answer with complexity or end with complexity is that we actually know that achieving impact is a very complex endeavor. And we've tried to say, don't let that overwhelm you. Start somewhere, come on the on-ramps. There's all kinds of systems and movement happening and interchanges and mutuality and feedback loops. But these are on-ramps to this. You can go deep as you'd like, but there is definitely a very straightforward path to engage. And that I just want to say that the more that we see the norms growing of using these methods that people are agreeing with, using these frameworks, using these conventions, the more that we can attract more dollars into investing in those enterprises and in those efforts that are really trying to have positive impact and reduce negative impact. And so that is our closing statements to you. Thank you so much for being part of this today. Anmesh?
Thank you so much. This is an amazing webinar. I think everybody in the call really probably agrees with you. I hear a lot of good things. I'm glad that you are here. And it seems like there's a more need to and more hunger for the knowledge that you have shared. So we look forward to seeing you again next year. But before we end it over, I mean, we still have we tried to answer most of the questions. There are still lots of questions that have not been answered. Lorna, is there any question that has been so burning to something that you want to highlight?
I think there are many questions. So someone was asking if we could actually share the transcript of the Q&A, because I think these responses might be interesting for multiple people.
Okay, we'll do that. Any other burning question we should really answer? I know there are so many questions today, and we have answered as much as we can, but anything that stands out to you, Lorna?
Well, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more about the data quality that Veronica was also talking about, because many people are interested in how do you really get the data quality, especially in developing countries, places where it is really hard to get good data.
And maybe I can add that to a little bit of question for Veronica here. So one of the things that we are noticing is that, especially in a pandemic time, that there's a lot of data trust issue going on. I mean, it was always there. It's nothing new, but pandemic has actually magnified this issue, the data trust issue. What are your thoughts? How can people increase the quality and the data altogether so that people all can flourish from the good data?
Sure. So that's a really big question that I can't answer but I will say, what I said in the chat was it really depends on if you're collecting primary or secondary data. If you're collecting primary data, it's in your control. You need to set up data quality assurance processes. If you're collecting secondary data and someone's collecting it for you, you need to have good data policies, both that protect the personal information of the people you're collecting information from, but then also as the person commissioning or collecting that secondary information, you need to ask really good strategic questions to whoever your data collection firm is. And that's on the one hand. In terms of the data systems component, because I see there's systems pieces, I would say UNMESH and SOPAC have a great tool. But in addition to that, we mentioned the tracer, we mentioned there's a couple of tools out there. And so if you're working in the tool piece, make sure that you set up either the algorithms or the overall methodology to ensure that you're collecting and protecting those data pieces. And then if you're in the world of big data, that's a whole other webinar session, but there are data privacy, data collection, and data quality issues in that too. And even questions around, from the trust perspective, even questions around whether that's applicable to your very micro level question. And so that's a webinar for another day.
Okay, so I think we can keep going, but I must say that I think we should end now, and maybe have another follow-up webinar sometimes next year. There's lots of questions today, so we can share that with Veronica and Jane, and hopefully come up with the even next level of insightful webinar. So thank you, Jane and Veronica. I really appreciate it. And thank you everyone in this group. It is an amazing group of people that have participated. That shows hunger for the need for continuous learning and improvement. So really look forward to advancing this journey, advancing this field, and building the field really in a right way. So thank you all for your time. And with that, we'll sign off, and we'll all be in touch. We'll be sharing all the recordings and some presentation, as well as some of the answers to some of the questions. So thank you so much all, and stay in touch.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye-bye.